Welcome back to Resilience+Rise, the podcast wherein we talk about the extraordinary from the heart of the challenge. I'm your host, Thomas Scaria, and if you're feeling a pull towards a deeper purpose, a more impactful legacy, maybe beyond the peaks that you have already conquered or working towards conquering, you're in the right space. Because just like 26.2 transformative miles I explore in my best selling book, life's most significant chapters begin when we dare to redefine our finish line. And yes, it is available to buy. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Gail Page, also known as the Queen of Difficult Conversation. Gail's expertise cuts to the heart of team dynamics, or it could be even the individual persons, addressing the very issues that can silently erode morale in a team, stifle productivity, and ultimately impact your bottom line. So, with this, Gail, welcome to Resilience+Rise, the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest. I'm looking
My
forward.
my pleasure. So, Gail, what the intrigue was the concept about difficult conversation.
Mm,
We all call it in a different way, and sometimes a lot of us at times we may not even acknowledge it. We may want to sweep it under the carpet, or like the beautiful elephant in the room, we may not even know that it is there. But if I ask you, why are difficult conversations not just necessary as per your understanding, but also a foundation for building, forget about the workplace, but within your own self?
mm. So I think probably if I tell you why I'm so um, passionate about teaching people about difficult conversations, that might give you and your listeners a
Beautiful.
better. So I can remember back to, oh, about 30, 40 years ago. Um, my ex-husband was in the Air Force. And as a wife of, my behavior had a direct impact on his career. And as a wife of, we were told pretty much keep your opinions to yourself and don't rock the boat, which is really, really hard when you can see people not being treated as well as they could. But I was a dutiful wife and I did rock the boat. And then I discovered assertiveness. And it totally changed my life. It changed the way that I showed up in relationships, the way people showed up in their relationships with me. But the most important thing was the way I had a relationship with myself.
Wonderful.
Because learning about assertiveness helped me find my voice, it helped me speak my truth, and it helped me step into my power. And being able to do that literally changed my life.
So let's just pause over there for a moment, Gail. Is that when we talk about you were bound as per the rules, regulations, policies, procedures. So having this personal journey, confronting, let's start from the first word itself, because we all talk about change, but what comes before change is always the fear.
Mm.
So the fear of the confrontation. And you mentioned about the power of assertiveness, let's say the liberation of assertiveness. Can you tell a little more on that?
Well, I think everybody can be assertive. It's just that often it's a hit or a miss. And unfortunately, assertiveness often gets confused with aggression.
Okay.
In fact, in one of the dictionaries I've read, it brings in aggression, which really, really annoys me because to me, being assertive is respecting your own opinions and respecting everybody else having the right to their opinions, even when they're different. And I think it's something that when we do come to a conversation with respect for both ourselves and for the other person, then we're a lot more likely to have a positive outcome,
Okay.
much more likely.
Hmm. But when this happened, yes, you mentioned about outcome.
Mhm.
But here, what I'm seeing is just one side of the painting. And you said, yes, things have been good. You have been assertive and you got. But what has been the impact of finding your own voice? Whether we talk about being assertive, or in another words, I say is about setting boundaries,
Oh,
wh-
totally.
which is my way of looking at being assertive about until where I can be pushed, or it is asking what you need for your own. There was a word I think so you mentioned self worth and relationships. So, can you take us through those particular elements that is required, which could help you to get to the next level?
So the thing with assertiveness is you're able to say no without apologizing.
Hmm,
You're able to set your boundaries without shifting your boundaries. You're able to recognize when you're being triggered because it's very, very easy for us to point the finger out there and say, you make me feel. But when you do that, there are three others pointing back at us. They're called me, myself, and I. And that's where we need to start. We need to be looking at why is it that I'm getting triggered?
hmm,
What is the difference between saying to someone, you make me feel, and I feel? When we say, you make me feel, we actually give away our power because we're telling them that they have the power to make us feel anything that they choose to feel.
true.
Whereas if we say, I feel upset or I feel angry, no one can argue with that because it belongs to us. As soon as we offload the responsibility for how we feel onto someone else, they can turn around and say, no, I don't,
Hmm,
which takes the conversation down another route, not a route that we want to go. And I think, especially in relationships, knowing what triggers us and knowing that we've got two eyes, two ears, and one mouth for a reason, being able to pause and take a breath before we react from the gut instead of responding from our head, that in itself is what will help keep relationships intact.
hmm.
And if you
Interesting.
take, sorry, go on.
Continue. Yeah, continue, continue.
No, I was thinking if you take that into the workplace, if you have got people who continually talk over each other, who continually interrupt, then the impact on morale and team dynamics is really, really negative. Now, I'll give you an example. So I was running a difficult conversations workshop, and normally what happens is that I have a piece of flip chart paper up, and I get everybody to come up, write their name, and one thing that would make being part of the day worthwhile for them. That way I know that I can meet everybody's needs. So the first few people came up, picked up the black felt tip pen, wrote their name, and wrote the one thing. And then this guy got up, looked me up and down, and picked up the red pen, wrote his name in capitals, and then wrote the word nothing, double underlined it, and slammed the pen down on the table beside me. And he was sat there going, oh my goodness. And you could see he was just waiting for me to have a go at him. So I said to him, I says, I'm getting a sense that you don't actually want to be here. To which he responded, oh, bravo, dear, bravo. And then I said, I'm actually getting the impression as well that you were sent. And he went, oh, 2 for 2. Well done. And once again, you could see his colleagues going, oh, my goodness. So I said to him, look, I tell you what, why don't you give me an hour of your time? And then if at the end of that hour you feel that it's worthwhile, you can leave with my blessing, and I'll even talk to your manager on your behalf. He was just about to get up until I said, that is, unless you're not up for the challenge. So
Okay.
I knew he wasn't going to leave if I said. So for the first 3/4 of an hour, I made sure that he was totally engrossed in what he was doing. 15 minutes to go, I went to him, I said, look, you've only got 15 minutes left. What? You've only got 15 minutes left. Yeah. 5 to the hour, I said to him, look, I said, I've only got 5 minutes left, so you can leave now. He said, look, do you mind? I'm busy. I thought, yes. So he stayed, and he was a very, very willing participant for the rest of the day. 2 weeks later, they came back for the follow-up. And I said to the team, so we'll just do a quick round robin. One thing you've tried that worked really well and why you think that was, and one thing that perhaps didn't go as well as you would have liked and why you think that was. So his hand shot up. 5 voices shouted, no, don't let him go. We need to say something. And he looked as if somebody had taken his favorite toy away from him. And I said, well, normally I would have said, yes, you go first. I said, but I get the impression you might want to hear what they're going to say. Each of those 5 people had been in a meeting with him at different times. Not once did he talk over people. Not once did he interrupt them. Not once did he tell them that their ideas wouldn't work. Not once did he say, oh, we've tried that before. Now, this was a man who had a terrible reputation in the firm. And his colleagues saw him move from being the person who picked up the red pen, wrote his name in capitals, wrote nothing, and double underlined it, go to somebody who could change. And that was after one day in the Difficult Conversations workshop. And that is why I love what I do.
Absolutely wonderful. And this absolutely comes to the next question as you were talking. If you were kind enough to tell what few of the strategies, I'm not asking you to open up your treasure trove, but few of the practical strategies for engaging. Now, as I believe, a conversation takes 2 plays, and it is also deep listening, compassionate listening, and that's where it helps to elevate the mind to be open and being curious about what the other person is saying. So what would be few of the practical strategies that you could suggest? I don't say the word advice because a lot of people give advices, but I rephrase it as suggestions. So if there are suggestions that you would like to give the audience, what would those be, Gail?
Well, there are 5 steps that I recommend because every difficult conversation is a step towards clarity, connection, and change.
Wow.
So the first step is to set your intention. See, the thing is, Thomas, that so often we go into a conversation and we don't actually know what outcome we're looking for. And that's often why we find ourselves in a difficult conversation. Because if we don't know what outcome we're looking for, how can the other person know? It sounds simple, but I guarantee that you've done it, I've done it. And that's why conversations become difficult because we start floundering and questioning ourselves. So that's the first step. Know what your purpose is for the conversation, know what impact you want to have. And the main thing is, how do you want the other person to feel
Hmm.
while you're in the conversation? So the second step is to take responsibility. Because if we don't own our part and our behavior and our thoughts and our tone, then that will have a direct impact upon the other person. We also need to stop blaming and shaming. You know, as I said earlier, it's so easy to point the finger at other people.
Hmm.
We take our part in it and acknowledge it. Because if we do that, it builds trust and it de escalates defensiveness. The third one is express yourself clearly and calmly using I statements and be specific and factual. Facts are something that people can't argue with. Name the behavior, not the person. You know, if you say to somebody, oh, you are so difficult, well, you're seeing that person through a lens that won't change if you continue to call them difficult.
Hmm.
Say, I find your behavior difficult. So um, I find it difficult when you leave the files on your desk and I try and find them and they're not where they're meant to be.
Hmm.
So that's your ownership. Keep your tone open. The fourth thing is pause and listen. Too many of us rush to defend or solve. That's ringing true for you there, Thomas, I can see. And, you know, too often we're just listening for that person to take a breath before we go into the, and me next, and share our thoughts. Whereas if we listen to understand and listen to connect, the other person feels it and makes them a lot more open to wanting to keep on the conversation with us. And if we can validate their feelings while we're in that conversation with them, and when we disagree with their perspective, it shows that we've actually heard them. And that actually makes them more open to hearing our perspective because we've listened.
Hmm.
The last one is seek solutions together.
Hmm.
Rather than making it about me and you, if we make it about us, which is a lot more inclusive, and say to them, what would a good outcome look like for you? And then keep quiet. Because if you do that, they're a lot more likely to tell you rather than you saying, oh, well, I'm not, no, that's not what I want. Let them tell you what a good outcome would look like for them. And then say to them, yeah, I get that. And a good outcome for me will be this. Let's look at how we can work together and both commit to keeping our relationship intact and having a positive outcome from this conversation. And when we do that and we end with clarity and we also end on agreement for the next steps, I don't often guarantee much, but I guarantee if you use those steps, you're a lot more likely to keep that relationship intact than if you just rammed into it without even knowing why you're there.
Wow, that's pretty good. And guys, whoever is listening, I will be putting out Gail's information on the comments below over here. So do have a look onto it. So, Gail, the reason I was smiling was, of course, as a coach, one of my key statements that I walk into any, in fact, not only for as a coach, but also as a podcaster or anything, is seek first to understand, then to be understood, which is Stephen Covey's one of the rules. And I always believe in that. And I have found, again, in my past experience as a project manager, or even prior to that, I was a SME, wherein it was subject matter. So I would be, it was that inculcation that I had to tell everything what was happening around. But taking a step back, it becomes so much more wonderful in handling that people want to be heard. People want to be understood. And when they here get these two elements together, comes the element of value. And this is not just on professional platforms, but as humans with one another,
100%.
it becomes
This isn't a skill just for the working world. This is a life skill. One of my clients, he was a chief technical officer, and he came to see me one day. And
okay.
I have a message for you from my wife. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't think I know your wife. He said, no, you don't. But the message is, tell Gail, I don't know what the hell she's doing with you, but just tell her to keep on doing it because I am loving the new version of my husband. So it's not just about work. This has a ripple effect. It ripples out to relationships with couples, with their children, with their friends and family, and with their community. I've been doing this 26 years as a business. Before that, many years ago, I was a psych nurse. And then later in life, I retrained as a social worker. So I have seen the impact that people's lives or how people's lives are affected because of difficult conversations that were never had. And that's what drives me because I know how I felt, and I certainly wasn't in a bad place. I just had to mind my P's and Q's, which when
Mhm.
you're a woman like me can be a bit difficult at times. But for people who, like especially senior leaders, they don't have someone, unless they've got me or you, they don't have someone that they can offload to and say, the weight of this is huge. So knowing how it can impact people. In fact, one of my past clients, I got really, really strong intuition. And don't ask me why, but I picked the phone up to him one day and I hadn't coached him for about 7 months. And we call him John. I said, hey, John, I says, I don't know why. I says, but I just got a nudge to call you. And this sigh came from him and he just went, oh my God. And I went, oh, and I literally got goosebumps just from the tone. And he said, if you had called me 5 minutes later, my wife would now be a widow and my kids would now be without a dad. And even now, I mean, that's donkey's years ago, but I
Wow.
still felt like he was a business owner. He had, I think it was 24 or 26 staff. He knew everyone. They were like family. He knew who had just had a baby, somebody who had just got a mortgage and they'd mortgaged themselves up to the hilt, somebody who had just been diagnosed with cancer, their parent was going into a care home, you name it, he knew all of that. But what they didn't know was that his business wasn't doing very well. And he said, I'm going to have to make redundancies. How do I choose between somebody that I know is mortgaged up to the hilt or somebody who's just had a baby or all these other people? And he said, I just woke up this morning and these are his words, not my words. These are his words. He just went, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. And I thought, wow, thank you for my intuition. And there are so many people who are carrying weights like that, and no one knows because they don't know how to have what they perceive will be a difficult conversation. But as I always tell people, the most difficult conversation we will ever have is the one we have in our heads, because
So
that defines
true.
every other conversation we have out there.
That was a powerful story. But again, when you just mentioned about the difficult conversation we have in our head, is that as what you mentioned is that listening it out. But sometimes our head talks something else. It's the ego which keeps us pushing us, or they say that it's trying to make it safe, but it can be very challenging. But what I usually have my way of putting across is being a little more compassionate to one another, and first and foremost, being kind to your own self.
Totally. That's where it has to start, Thomas. It has to start with us. Self compassion, self care, checking your self talk. And, I can remember when I did my first NLP training with Richard Bandler, he was saying about, oh, tell the negative self talk to go forth and multiply. And he was saying about, it's trying to keep us safe. So we think. But what I have learned over the years is if my self talk is negative, I literally have a conversation with it and say, okay, so you've shown up and you're telling me this. What is it I need to learn? What could I be doing differently? What could I be thinking differently? When we do that, we no longer, or this negative self talk, no longer has to try and keep us safe. We're actually looking at it and we're finding out more information about what's going on for us. That was a game changer for me because before,
That's that's fantastic. Again, I may say it in another way, but again, what you have put across, Gail, that is very profound. Having a conversation with your self-talk and say that, okay, this is what you're telling me. What do you want to say further? Or how, what do you, it's not about what you want me to do because then they are in control.
but it's about what do you want me to know?
Wh- What are the lessons I'm learning?
Yeah. What am I missing?
What am I
And then
missing?
you can do like parts therapy. So you can say, okay, so you're telling me this, and you're using a lot of energy on this negative self talk. This is what I need. I need to feel confident, etc., etc., etc. If instead of beating up on me with negative self talk, how about if you use your energy, which is very powerful, and work with me? Imagine the difference that that would make. And I am not joking, Thomas. It works. It literally works because you don't have one part of you that's working against you and another part of you that's trying to fight the thing that, the part of us that's fighting against us. It's using its energy with the rest of us and working for our greater good.
Super. Just being mindful of the time. And this is a beautiful conversation which has been going on, but just being mindful of the time. There are so many fantastic nuggets that you put across. And I am, at least for me, I know I'll be looking into this recording again and working out on how it's to be done. But if there are kind of three takeaways that you would suggest to people, either in having the last one was amazing about having a difficult conversation, because what I've heard is that the finger and three comings. So there is a commonality, whether it is in the personal life, whether it is in the professional life, or whether it is in our own self internal life. So, what would be kind of the three things that would immediately come up to your mind and ask people that something to consider about?
I think the main thing is to realize everybody is going through something.
Okay.
And what you see presented to you is not necessarily what's real. We all put these masks on,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a protection. In fact, when I'm running workshops, I actually give people masks to put on, and I make them tight so that they get really uncomfortable. And then after a little while, I say, now take your mask off and say to them, how good does that feel?
Wonderful.
So that's one thing. Take your mask off. And I'm not saying, rip your shirt open and bare your heart. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is for people to realize that if we can show up as our authentic, real self without the need for masks, we give other people the opportunity to do the same thing.
Hmm.
The other thing, as we mentioned earlier, is if you're going to have a conversation with someone, stop seeing it as a difficult conversation. Just see it as a conversation. Even that small thing has a massive impact. And do it early. Do not let it drag on. Because the longer it drags on, it turns from a grain of sand into this massive boulder. And then we get to a stage where it's sort of, we just get beyond the tipping point. Yeah. And the third thing is always remember why you're going into the conversation. What's your purpose? How do you want the other person to feel? And what outcome can you both share going forward?
That was amazing. Fantastic. So, guys, as a resilience coach, I know at times still working that navigating challenging conversation is vital aspect for building both personal and professional strength. Gail, you have provided so much of insight, invaluable tools. I'm sure would be something that people can put a thought to, get into practice, and succeed one step at a time. With this, I take the opportunity to say thank you very much for your space and time, Gail. Have a good day.
Been an absolute pleasure, Thomas.
Thank you.